Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Training, Learning, and Development community. We're doing the XR playlist this month, and probably a little bit next month too. We are doing next month too because we have James Watson coming up with an episode next month. Originally, we had James Watson scheduled with Debbie, but so much content, we decided to split it up. And I'm so excited to have Debbie here this morning with us. So thank you very much, Debbie. Thank you for being here, and happy Thanksgiving week to you.
And back to you as well.
Thanks. And so before we get started, what I wanted to do was I wanted to ask you some questions about how you got started in training. And, most of the stuff, like what I do before I meet a guest is I usually just go to their LinkedIn profile and stuff. And I'm not going to say how long you've been working with computers because I was like, wait a minute. You've been doing this for a really, really long time. And so can you tell us a little bit about how you got into technology and how you got into training? I mean, especially now being kind of like a spokesperson for augmented reality in L&D, you're kind of like one of the premier people to talk about this kind of stuff. How did you start out and how did you get here?
So it's funny, many years ago, I had my first job. I worked at McDonald's. I think there are a lot of us that worked at McDonald's. And I eventually became a trainer for McDonald's. And that was the start of my training career. I'll tell you, one thing about McDonald's is the training and the way that they approach customer service is fantastic. And that set the stage for me for a career in life and training. But I've always been interested in technology, even as a young girl. I probably had something that some of you may still have, and I found it recently in one of my boxes. I was cleaning some things out. I have a slide rule. And in high school, we had the slide rule team where we had math competitions and you had to solve equations using the slide rule. I was always interested in math and technology, became a computer programmer. And my first job out of school was I was a robotics programmer at Texas Instruments, and I programmed robot arms. And from there, it just went on. I had a long career in computer science, and I taught computer science at one of the local colleges and really enjoyed that and decided to switch from programming to teaching because I felt like that was more my calling.
Wow, that is amazing. I did not know this about you, and I've known your name for years. And so you actually used to be a programmer, so you're heavily technical. That is great. So I wanted to ask you, in the spectrum of things, since you have been doing this for so long, you've been working with technology for so long, augmented reality, why are you getting into it? How does it impact what we do in L&D as far as in the timeline of your experience?
Sure. So in my current role, I am a technology consultant, and I work with enterprise organizations and I advise them on emerging technologies. So I have to stay ahead of the curve. I need to be 3 or 4 years ahead of my clients. And so this was a natural fit for me. I'm very interested in immersive technology and have been for years. I have invested a lot of my own personal income in technology. I have my Oculus equipment plus a number of other headsets and VR equipment and augmented reality equipment. And I'm always looking at tools and techniques that can further and enhance what we do in the enterprise.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask you, so when it comes to augmented reality, we were talking about earlier, just sort of the impact that, augmented reality would have on corporate training. For me, I think that it even more so than in virtual reality currently. But are there, when it comes to augmented reality, are there things that we are doing right now, just regular consumers or just in our everyday lives, where we might be using augmented reality and not even realize it?
Oh, yes. There's so much of that we're doing right now, from using Snapchat, which employs a component of augmented reality. There are tons of other applications. If you shop on Amazon and if you go to look at an item, sometimes you'll see a button that'll say, view this in my room. And so let's say you're looking at a lamp and you want to see what it looks like on a table in your room. You can actually click a button and it will bring up the lamp and you can see how it looks before you buy it. IKEA has the same kind of application. I was sitting in the movie theater on Sunday, and I don't know if any of you guys know about the Nuvi app. If you go to the movies before the trailers start, there's this Nuvi trailer that play. They talk about what's new on TV and other things. But there's also a chance to play a game. And if you download the Nuvi app, and I did that Sunday afternoon, I was shooting things as a penguin flying through an Arctic space. And there was a child that was sitting next to me when we were watching the movie, and he was totally enhanced. I moved my smartphone over so he could see what I was doing, and he looked at his mom and he goes, "We've got to come back to the movie so I can play this game before the movie starts."
Right.
Which was a lot of fun. I mean, there's so many things that are out there in the consumer world that we're already doing and we're already using. Our local Museum of Natural Science has an exhibit on the wall where you can see a scene that's in the Arctic again, and kids can walk up to it and a penguin will appear next to them, and they reach out like they're going to pet the penguin. There's and of course their parents are looking at them like, what the heck is going on? But they just naturally are engaged in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Houston, and we have our NASA Space Center, and they have an augmented reality experience that's tied to the Space Center, where you can, if you're at the Saturn V rocket in the warehouse, and you've downloaded the app, you can use the augmented reality experience to watch a video. So there's tons of things that are out there in the consumer world, and we're starting to see more and more in the enterprise.
Right, and that right there is like an educational experience, right, at NASA. So, yeah, that's pretty amazing. So I want to go ahead and just get started with what you're going to talk about, preparing your company for an augmented reality learning program. But one last thing, what do you think is the most impactful or most powerful aspect of augmented reality in corporate training right now? Is there any one thing that you can just start us off with to say why this is something you need to consider?
Yeah, I think one of the things is the idea of being information that you can actually pull, and for performance support, just-in-time information. So you think about someone who's about to perform a task, and they need to do a quick review of that task. They can scan something, watch a video, have a quick checklist of information that they need. It's the power of it, just in time, in the moment, access to information.
Yeah, it definitely feels like augmented reality has some very powerful application for the performance support function. I think that when I've gone to say, VR and just sort of, mixed reality and extended reality sort of expos, that's the one thing that's always stuck with me. If people are looking at, especially on the assembly line, trying to troubleshoot something, just how powerful augmented reality can actually be for that type of a scenario. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and, minimize my video and mute my audio, and I'll let you take it away.
Sure. So, hello, everybody. I'm really excited to talk to you today about augmented reality, and just to start off a little bit, I thought I would start off and just emphasize the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality, because sometimes I think people have a misunderstanding of the differences, and there may be some of you that have never experienced that. So let's talk about that for a minute. So with virtual reality, you usually have a headset. Like, here's my Oculus Go headset, and once you put this headset on, your view is blocked from the world, so you can't see anything else. You're just experiencing whatever is going on inside the headset. And so that's your virtual world experience. Now, with augmented reality, usually what you'll have is some sort of marker, or maybe a piece of paper, it may be something that you're scanning, and you'll do that with your smartphone or some other type of device. This is my picture of my two dogs. This is Rosie and Daisy. And so you'll use your smartphone and you will scan that information, or your tablet or whatever, and then this information is overlaid to you on the screen, but you're still able to see the real world in front of you. So it doesn't block your view. There is also special headsets that you can wear, and sometimes those allow you to see information in your peripheral vision, but you still can see the world around you. So that's the big difference between augmented and virtual reality. There's things that you can do and places that you can use this in both worlds, but we're going to talk a little bit about augmented reality right now. There are many uses for augmented reality, like we discussed earlier, performance support. You'll see people use augmented reality for location-based learning, for other things like education, and then the big thing about augmented reality is that you can use augmented reality to help learners interact with content directly. So they're pulling content rather than having content pushed at them. And I think this gives them a little more sense of control. Typically, when you have augmented reality, to experience it, you need to download an app to your smartphone or to your mobile device, and then you're going to scan something, and then you'll experience that augmented reality. And as we discussed earlier, there are a number of commercial applications that you can use to do this. So we talked about the application from the IKEA store. There are a number of other ones. One that I like is the AR Ruler app. And with the AR Ruler app, you can use that to measure information as well. Like I said, there's tons of them out there. There's even one that you can use to put a fake tattoo on your arm, so you can see what it looks like before you actually do it, or to just to impress your family that you've received a tattoo. But there's tons of those, and there's lots of different applications that you can use them for. I saw a really cool application, and this was at a conference that I attended this past summer, and it was from Sprint. So if you go to the Sprint store, you can download their app, and then you can point it at some of the marketing information that's on the screen displayed in the store, and you can get information about it. So, for example, they have a information about the Google Pixel. So if you point your smartphone at that app, it might show you a video or some information. But what's really interesting about this app is Sprint is using this for both their employees and their customers. So if you're a customer and you come into the store and there's nobody there to help you right away, you can scan one of the information pieces and find some information. Or if you're an associate in the store and you need to find some just-in-time information about a specific product for a customer, you can scan information and give and share that with them. There's no way that I think that an associate can know everything about all the different products. So this is a great resource for them to get that just-in-time information. So check out your local Sprint store. I think that they've got this in most of the Sprint stores. But if it's not there, I can give you a link with some information to check that out as well. I also have found that there's a lot of really good material that's out there on the web about augmented reality. I think that we've got one here. There's a link to find trending augmented reality apps and services. I guess I'm going to have to check that out. But I also, in the chat box, I put a link to a Harvard Business Review article. And I think this is a really good resource for managers if you want to go out and check that out. It's a series of articles. They show you information that are specific to talk to your managers about augmented reality, and the article set. It's $5, I think, to purchase it, but it has augmented reality features. So you can download the special Harvard Business Review app, and you can actually use that to demonstrate augmented reality. And there's lots of really interesting components to that. And I don't know, can I get Luis back? Luis, can I share a video or something on the system?
Videos might be a little tough. They kind of buffer a little bit, and but you could try. Okay. If you want to share your screen, all you have to do is mouse over your window, and there's like a little computer with the arrow on it, and that'll show you the share option.
Yep, I got it. All right, let me just share my screen, and let me do that if I can do it. Take a second here. All right, so this is this article, and what I wanted to show you, can you see this, Luis, as well?
There, it just popped up.
Okay, great. So here's this example of the augmented reality experience that's on this article. So this is a screenshot out of the app, so you can see that this piece actually animates, and you can share it as well. So I love this as an example to show augmented reality to someone. I'm going to apologize right now. I'm going to just stay in non presentation mode so I can flip through this presentation and show you a couple of things. But that's a really cool application. Another one that I really like is the application from Dynamics 365. And the interesting thing about 365 is there is an AR component which allows you to use the HoloLens glasses, and you can share information. You can connect to someone and have them walk you through information. And out there on this site, there's a really cool video. We won't look at that now, but you can go out there and check it out. But it just shows you the power of using augmented reality to solve problems. And I just find that very, very interesting. There's a ton of periodicals and magazines that are working and doing things in AR. And these are great examples for you to look at to see how something is done, what they're using it for. This is one from USA Today that I've really enjoyed, and you can go out there and take a look at that. But the New York Times is doing a really good job of doing AR projects as well. And I just noticed that they've added some new things that you can go out and look at if you want to as well. I was looking at my Twitter feed and noticed that they had some new things out there, and just in time for the holidays. But one of the things that I really like about what the New York Times is doing is they do a really good explainer articles and information on how to view and use augmented reality. So if you go out to New York Times Magazine and then just look at that, and then look at some of their explainer information, I think that's a great resource when you're trying to show somebody how to view the AR experience, because I think that that's a challenge as well, is for folks to understand how to do that, what the technology is, and how to experience it. Also some problem solving, depending on if you're using a smartphone or if you're using a tablet. So I'm going to just stop for a second there, and let me stop sharing and come back on and see if we've got any questions or things about what I've discussed so far.
I don't think no questions so far, but I did have something for you. Like when you were talking about augmented reality, especially like now, is it do you think that, I mean, is your primary sort of experience with it is mostly with smartphones?
I think a lot of people are using smartphones for augmented reality. They're not using tablets as much. I mean, you can use it. You can use tablets, but it's an in the moment experience. So most people use a device they have in their pocket, and so I've seen more and more folks just use their smartphones for augmented reality.
And then when it comes to kind of the folks that are using augmented reality with headsets, is that mostly like, say, in manufacturing environments, or are you seeing a lot of people use that like in, just sort of offices and stuff?
Well, there's a new version of HoloLens that's coming out, and I think that's going to change the game. And there are a lot more augmented reality headsets that are out there. In fact, when I was out in San Jose this year and went to one of those dangerous stores that has all the new tech toys and everything, and I tried on a headset that was for bicyclists. And so it was really cool. The idea is that you're able to get some statistics and information while you're cycling. And I thought, oh gosh, I really want to try this out. But then my thought immediately went to, oh, I'm going to have to buy a bicycle to really make this experience work. And then get into all of that. And I'm not coordinated enough to do that, I don't think, but it was a really interesting idea of using the augmented reality glasses.
So obviously we're talking about something that is immersive, and it's, the level of engagement is really, really high. And I guess the challenge is like, how do you get buy-in?
Yeah. And I think that's a good challenge. And so I have actually written a white paper, and I put a link to it out on the out in the chat box. And it was an article that I wrote for Association of Talent Development called Seeing the Possibilities with Augmented Reality. And there's a link for that as well. And one of the things that I talk about in that white paper is that the first thing you have to do is you've got to find a solid business case used for AR, and consider launching with a pilot program. With any kind of immersive learning or anything new technology based, don't just do it just because you think it's cool and it's something that your organization will use. I always believe in finding a champion, somebody else who's going to be the person who's going to help me find a reason for doing something with technology. And I really believe that any kind of immersive technology should be an addition to something in your learning program. It shouldn't be a replacement. So if you find somebody who has a need that you can fulfill with augmented reality, and you can pilot that, and you have something small that you can do, that you can show a success with and show a return on investment, that's the best strategy to get started. And then you're going to have to loop in your IT department with this, because a couple things. Number one, if they're using a company smartphone, you'll have to make sure that if you're creating something that's using an app that you create, or if you use an off-the-shelf app, that's going to be okay to use. You're going to want to test that and make sure that there aren't any privacy issues. So it's very important to loop in your IT department early into the development phase. So go through, do that pilot, get the buy-in, and then take it to the next step, the next thing that you want to do. And just run through all of the different questions that you would normally do when you're thinking about using something new. What's missing from the current approach, and why are we using augmented reality to solve that? And then what are some of the trade-offs that we're going to do? And how are we going to integrate that into the experience I think it's also very important to think about what's needed before and after the augmented reality experience, and then what's needed to ensure that the experience is delivered, and what do you need to include on the user or customer side to deploy seamlessly, and if you're in the enterprise, to do that at scale. So there's lots of, of, of questions and things that you need to consider before you do that. I'm going to go back to my experience at the NASA Space Center and talk a little bit about that experience, because when I first experienced this AR component, it wasn't pleasant, because I was in this big warehouse building with a Saturn V rocket, and there was an exhibit. And let me just share that with you so you can see what that looks like. Go back over here to I took some pictures of the actual application that I'll share with you. So here's this Saturn V rocket and the blast off in augmented reality. So at this point, you can download the Space Center app and you can activate the augmented reality mode and point your phone at the sign and have that experience. Well, we're in this big warehouse, as you can see, and cell reception was very, very slow. And this was a huge app to download. There was also no wireless access. So for me, that was a bit of a fail, because it would have been nice to have had that app already downloaded before I got there. And then the second thing that wasn't a good experience is that there were a number of these signs located. There's one here, there's one further down on the end of the tip of the rocket, and there were a number of these signs that were available. And when I scanned the picture, it was the exact same video for each one of these. So the experience wasn't great. It would have been nice if when I went to a different sign, that there was a different video, that there was a different experience, but I didn't have that. So I think you really need to think about your use of augmented reality. What are you trying to accomplish? You need to test it in the environment. I think if somebody had tested that in the warehouse, they would have realized that, hey, maybe we need to really point this out to people before they come out here, that they need to have this app downloaded. There were some things that they just should have done in ahead of time in order to make that work, and it wasn't done. So that kind of colored my sense of the application. So as you're going through and developing the augmented reality experience, all of these things come into play. And I think that there is more of a sense of iteration that you'll do, especially with the first few projects that you work on as you're preparing your augmented reality experience. You'll want to go through and create it, test it with a few people, test it in the environment, make sure everything is working correctly, and then really test it out before you deploy it. A lot of the applications that you create, you can get some good analytics. You can see, what time of day people viewed it, what type of device they viewed it on, how long they stayed in the application. There are a lot of really good resources that you can utilize. And if you have to record that and feed that back into a learning record store or into an LMS, there's the capability to utilize XAPI to do that as well. So those are just some cautionary things that I would say about developing your first augmented reality experience. For those of you that are thinking about doing this, there are a number of tools out there that you can use. One of the tools that I've been using and I've been talking about a lot is a tool from a company called Zappar. And Zappar has this great tool. Let me go ahead and I'll share my screen again so I can show this to you. And this is ZapWorks from Zappar. And you can get a free trial of this. It's also not super expensive to go out and work with. But what you'll do is you'll actually be able to create your own little augmented reality experience. And so you'll be able to go in and you can see some of them that I've created and stuff. And it's a fairly easy tool to use. You basically can go in and you can add an image or a video or a sound or text or button or a contact calendar event, and you can add different components to that as you're building that experience. And then once you've built it, then you'll create a little code that they'll have to use a Zappar app, but they'll scan it and then they'll be able to have an interactive experience. So you can go out today after this session and log into Zappar and either download or use the online ZapWorks program to create your own augmented reality experience. And you don't have to be a programmer to do that. It's pretty basic, and there are a number of organizations that are actually using this to create some augmented reality experiences. Here in Houston, Shell Corporation is using it as part of their onboarding for leaders. They've created a game, and they're using it to provide some videos as part of the game for their onboarding. And I know that my friend Betty in Florida is using it with her company as well for onboarding. She did a great session at DevLearn, and she shared that as well. If you go out to Ask Betty on Twitter, she's got some information about that, and she shares that information. So you can check that as well. Those are just a couple of examples of things that people have created with ZapWorks. So I would encourage you to go out and check that out. All right. What about some questions, some information? It looks like we've been posting some resources, but do we have any questions or anything that somebody wants to ask?
Let me ask you this, Debbie. When you've got like sort of one of these augmented reality apps, like the content that people are pulling, is it typically video content or what sort of format?
So it's a number of things. It's video, it's graphics, it's audio, it's text, it's any number of information that people are using. I saw a really cool example last week. I was at a lab in North Carolina, and they shared an example. They're looking at a program for people where they're trying to monitor their food intake. And so they'd created a number of objects that are relative size to different types of food. And in the past, when they were trying to do this, social workers and other people, they would go out to a person's home. They'd have a bunch of a box full of things. So a cup, a mug, maybe some plastic fruit, different sizes of food, and they'd have to carry around this big box of things to put on the table and show people. Well, now they're creating an augmented reality tool that what they can do is they have the table, and they can project an augmented reality object and say, was this the size of the piece of steak that you ate? Or did you drink this much liquid in your glass or whatever? And they're able to capture that information. And it's the beginning of a program that they're using. But I was thinking about that, and I thought this is a great way to visualize that information, and without having to carry all these objects around, so you can share that with people. And so my brain started thinking about what are some of the other things that people carry around in a toolbox, or that they're having to transport and they're trying to demonstrate and show. And just like the example that I showed with the Harvard Business Review, where they were actually able to show that robot arm and show it working, if you can if you're in a location and you're able to share that and simulate that and show that in perspective. So on the table, you're actually sharing and showing something that is to scale and show that to another person. That's fairly impactful.
And what actually activates the, sort of or what triggers sort of the experience?
So the trigger can be a number of different things. So within ZapWorks, you have these things that are called Zap codes, and so they are. It may look like a VR, like a QR code, but it is different. Sometimes there are augmented reality triggers. Could just be an image. So, for example, in the movie theater, when I played the game, I went into the application, I pointed my smartphone at the screen, and that whole big movie screen, that image was the trigger that started the application. So typically that's what it is. There's a code or something that you're scanning that triggers that experience.
Amazing. So I know that for myself, when I think about this in my past, I used to work in a manufacturing company and used to do some training there. And, I know that for each of these huge, machines, it was a window manufacturing company, having some performance support like via augmented reality would have been helpful in a lot of scenarios. Like something as simple as how do you refill this desiccant container? Something simple where you have to take out this sack of, stuff that looks like sort of like sawdust and put it somewhere, right? Having, that level of performance support would be really helpful, where someone could just take a smartphone and sort of scan it and say, oh yeah, okay, you put it in here and then you cover it up like with maybe just a short video. Or even I was just thinking as you're talking, like I live close to a park and with all these exercise stations. And sometimes when I'm with my 5-year-old, we're like, okay, how do you do this? You put your leg up here and what? And it'd be really, really fun to actually scan something, like a ZapWorks code and just actually see somebody doing the activity. And so those would be considered like augmented reality applications, right?
Sure. And, the idea of using augmented reality rather than virtual reality is that it is a shared experience, because you are not all enclosed in the VR experience, which is it's a single experience, unless you're in this virtual space with a number of other virtual people. But with AR, I was talking to somebody, they were thinking about using AR in a facilitated classroom. And I said, sure. I said, if you had some things that were augmented reality experiences, you could have 2 or 3 people that could scan something, and then they could watch something together, and then they could share that back to the group. So, and another group could be watching a different video and they could be sharing that, so it allows you to have that experience. The other thing that's interesting about it is you can, since a lot of that information exists in the cloud, if there's an update, you can update the information, and then that when someone pulls that information, like let's say you had that manufacturing floor and you had the how to do videos or the information, if something was updated, then you just post the updated version out there in the cloud and it updates the information. You don't have to go out and put a new code out on the machine or anything. You just update the information in the cloud.
So Annie had posted, she had a question about tools for VR, but we're talking AR this episode. Is there anything in particular, like within L&D, like that you've seen that is like common tools, something that you're seeing being utilized more than others, something that like has an easier path for entry for folks?
Yeah, so I think that we're just getting there. There's a number of tools that are out there. I think at the conferences, a lot of us are talking about ZapWorks as an entry tool to get started. There are some other tools that are out there. Vuforia has some tools. That some of those seem to be a little more costly and not as easy for someone just to ramp up and use, but I've seen a lot of other ones. Metaverse has a tool, Wikitude AR Core, and now Adobe has just come out with an AR tool. I haven't had a chance to play with it, but some of my colleagues have said that it's an interesting tool as well. So there's not one that's out there that I would think you would think of, like when you think about e-learning, everybody thinks about Articulate Studio, or they think about, Adobe Captivate or something like that. But a lot of folks are developing things. If they're developing it in-house, they're using tools like Zappar. There are a number of people that are using agencies to develop applications, and those are applications that are a little more full-featured and require someone to build a custom application. If you build something like with Zappar, you'll use a Zappar app, or they now have a web-based tool that you can use where someone doesn't even need to download an app. They can just go to a link and they can have that experience. But I would say that right now, that's where the majority of people are doing. They're either using a low-end tool to create some things for piloting or some basic information, or they're having an agency build some really high-end augmented reality experiences. And more of those are in the consumer marketplace. There are a lot of companies that are using ad-placed augmented reality. Coca-Cola's come out with a new one for the holidays. There's one out for Jim Beam. There's a number of different companies that are using augmented reality advertising.
Interesting. And, and something that I was reading, I wanted to ask you about is, and you had sort of touched on it a little bit when you were talking about classroom, but using AR as a collaborative tool. Is that something you've done any work with at all? I've seen, what was it? Spatial, I want to say it was like, I don't know if you've seen them at all, but just really this incredibly like immersive environment where people can collaborate using augmented reality tools where, basically two people that are remote can actually come together and work on documents and things using augmented reality.
Yeah, I've seen that. I'm not sure about the cost or the application for that, because I think that's one of the things that I think is still with any kind of emerging technology. There's, how do you get the buy-in and how do you get somebody started in using the tool? And I think, baby steps are good. When we started with multimedia and everything else, we had to find the right fit for the technology. So finding something that you can do internally and showcase the need, and then thinking about, something that's a little more full featured like the spatial systems. It's a matter of how do you get that buy-in from your organization? And my recommendation is to find a group outside of L&D that will help you sponsor and work with you. Usually my go-to group is the safety department or compliance, because they're the groups that really have the needs, and if you can get them on board and get them to help you do a pilot, then I think that's a really good start to bringing it into your organization.
That should kind of be the highlight in this discussion. You're absolutely right. I totally agree with that. Get the safety people on board, and I'm sure that you have like a direct line to whoever's making the economic decisions about implementing something like this. Awesome. Okay, so how about, is there any particular in your experience, like a win that you've seen with using augmented reality in a learning program? Is there anything that's coming up to you?
Yeah, I think that the companies that I've talked to and the companies that I've worked with that have used augmented reality as part of their onboarding are seeing that very successful. It's a great way to get people engaged and to also to use that information. I've even talked to a company about using augmented reality as part of a scavenger hunt in the organization to find information and to take them through their experiences. In fact, we're talking about using it. I'm a member of a local Association for Talent Development chapter here in Houston, and we're going to use augmented reality as part of our sessions for our January and February meetings to introduce people to different things that have to do with ATD and how we're using how our volunteers work and our board members and everything. So we're going to use that to give them that experience and to get them up and talking and looking at things. So I've seen a lot of success in that. And I think people are just trying to discover really good use cases for augmented reality. I was in Cleveland a few weeks ago and met with a number of folks there, and we talked about different uses, and they're very excited about getting started with things that are around performance support. It says, just the idea of having that just in time and having it available to folks in the time of need. So looks like we've got a question there about.
Okay, if I read this one out loud, great for the podcast. Okay. So Beth is asking, what parts of onboarding are they using AR for? It seems like much of the video content could be done with less sophisticated technology. Augmented reality, in my mind, implies that there's a need to overlay your environment.
Yeah, and I think that what they're using augmented reality for here, like the example for Shell, is they are using that as part of their leadership onboarding. It was an easy way for them, for this gamification component, to overlay videos and information as the people were playing the leadership game, to quickly give them that information. It was packaged nicely. There are other information, other ways that they can do it, but it was a way for them to package it all up nicely and have them go from one experience to another experience. So that's why they use augmented reality for that.
So it's more of kind of like integrating gamification into the onboarding process.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I know that I've played Pokemon Go with my 5-year-old, and man, he just goes crazy over that. He just loves it. Yeah, you definitely get it. It's very immersive, and he's totally engaged the entire time.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so if you guys have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I will ask Debbie. Debbie, again, has like so much experience with technology and is just one of the premier speakers on augmented reality here in L&D. In fact, are you going to be speaking at any other events coming up soon?
I am. I have a number of events that I'll be speaking out, and I love to give a shout out to them. So the ATD Technology Conference that's coming up in San Jose, I believe it's going to be in February. And then we have Reality 360, which is happening in Orlando. I will actually be doing a workshop before the 360 conference on augmented reality and virtual reality. And then I'll be talking about augmented reality at the conference. And then I'll be talking again in May at the ATD International Conference on augmented reality. And a lot of it centers around the white paper that I wrote earlier this year about working and getting started with augmented reality for your enterprise organization.
Excellent. Okay, that's pretty exciting. Yeah, I'll try to. I live close to San Jose, so I might actually try to go to Technology and check things out. Now, outside of L&D, augmented reality, is it primarily still like sort of an entertainment thing? Like just on, I know like, the animal emojis, I have like, family that regularly send those to one another on their iPhones. Is there anything that you watch outside of L&D on the augmented reality side just to kind of keep up?
Yeah, there's a number of things. In fact, I've been including a number of things that are just out there on my Twitter feed. I included my handle for my Twitter feed in the chat, but it's CRE8 IVEII and out on Twitter. But I noticed that there were a number of new things that I included. In fact, just in time for Thanksgiving, for those of us in the U.S., I found an augmented reality experience. It's actually from last year, but it's a step-by-step guide to carve a virtual turkey. It's only available for for iOS, but very interesting way to think about augmented reality, and using that as a tool to cut your turkey.
I'm going to need that.
And there's a number of, just in time also for the holidays, there are a number of games that are out there. I've just ordered a game for called a Pictionary game, an updated game of Pictionary that uses augmented reality. And I noticed today that the New Yorker app has some augmented reality cartoons that you can look at. And I posted that out on my Twitter feed. So there's always things that are happening in augmented reality that you can look at. A lot of things that are happening out in the consumer market that are interesting. But I think it's important to look at some of those things because it gives you an idea of what people are using and how they're using it. And it's a great way for you to think about what are some of the things that you can do in augmented reality for your learning organization and how you can approach that. And there's, that's a great way to go out there and look at different things that are happening. So I'd highly recommend just going out and looking at some of those consumer applications as well, because there's so much of that's available for you to check out as well.
Yeah, and two of those examples are both educational, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that can just serve as some inspiration.
Yeah. And I think it also, when you're looking at those, you can also look at what works and what doesn't work, when you're thinking about the experience and how you're going to do that. And if there's something in that experience that didn't work for you, then how can you take that and make that better? So I'm always out there looking at that information, and I post a lot of things about augmented reality out there on my Twitter feed.
Okay, so we've got a little bit of time left. I just sort of want to wrap up a little bit, but just to summarize some of these things, to actually get an augmented reality sort of training or element into your training program, it doesn't need to necessarily cost anything, right? Like you were saying, is it Zapper or ZapWorks? Mm-hmm. You can get in there, and that's just a downloadable app that you can get onto your smartphone to get started?
Sure. And there is a desktop version of that. The desktop version is what you'll use to create the experience, and you'll use the app to launch the experience.
And that's amazing. That's great. And, any other kind of quick wins you could do if it's something you want to get into, like, just try to really research whether or not augmented reality is an option for you?
Yeah, like I said before, you really should go out and just experience it. Look at some of those things. Look at some of the examples that we shared today. Another example that I didn't talk about that's one of my favorites is the Google Translate app. Yeah, so Google Translate, you can use that to translate from one language to another. Normally, people will type in some text and it will translate it. But if you use the camera function in that app, you can point it at some text that's in a different language, and it'll translate it and overlay that for you as well. And that has some really interesting applications if you think about that as well.
Is that part of Google Lens, or is Google Lens even still around? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I don't know if it is or not, but it's the actual Google Translate app that you can download. And so I would check that out. I'm just looking at my AR stuff to see if there's something else that I would say. Look at the USA Today app. One that I just checked out recently was called Notable Women's. There's also an app that I looked at that's for colleges that you can download. I was looking at it this past week. University of Houston has a virtual campus walkthrough, and it's all done in augmented reality and 360 videos. And there are a number of other companies, other colleges that have that as well. NBC Sports has a really good augmented reality app that you can look at. And there's even a version of Jenga. If you don't have anything to do on Thanksgiving Day and you're trying to find something fun, there is an augmented reality version of Jenga that you can check out and look at. So there's tons of things that are already created in augmented reality that you can look at, and then you can go off and create your own application and check it out.
And so basically what we're talking about here is, with augmented reality, is just a way of being able to augment your training program with additional sort of capabilities, additional features to make it just better and produce more and more efficient, right?
Right. And just to supplement information and have that information where people can pull that information when they want, and not necessarily have that information pushed to them. So it's a quick and an easy way to provide them that information. They don't have to go search for it. They basically scan something and then they have that experience.
Excellent. So Debbie, thank you so much for sharing all this information with us. All these resources, all these links, I'm going to post them into the show notes. And I do have to say, as I was researching kind of the topic and the idea of augmented reality, there's a lot of stuff out there that is just fluff.
There is.
Having actual, these resources are great, can point people in the right direction. Make sure that you follow Debbie on Twitter if you don't already. Her link is on the bottom there. I just posted it. And is there any other way that people can reach you?
That's probably the best way for them to reach me. I'm also out on LinkedIn, and they can look me up at Creative as well, and they can find me.
And make sure, if you're going to San Jose to Tech Knowledge, that you say hi, or if you're going to go to Learning Solutions and the what was the event called? The
Realities 360.
Realities 360, all the way in Orlando. Make sure you say hi to Debbie there. Debbie, thanks again for coming in this morning, and have a happy Thanksgiving.
And you as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.